All right. So we got a couple people joining already. So welcome to our webinar today. We're just wait a couple more minutes as people are coming in here.
Some people may recognize the environment that I'm in, the
Yeah,
different logo.
pretty perfect. We'll give it one more minute here because I know we have several others that wanted to join.
Yeah, wasn't speaking specifically to you, Mark, but yeah.
All right. Well, I know we'll probably have some people come in here like we had before, but thank you for those that are joining so far for this live webinar today with Zenapptic. I have David Wilkins here from Zenapptic, the founder. And today we're focusing specifically on live events and even more specifically, some corporate events. And we're going to even talk about a recent project that Zenapptic did with the corporate clients, which is really cool. We'll get to talk about some of the specifics there in a moment. But this webinar is being recorded, so we'll share it, be able to share it afterwards. And for those, really quick, David, I just want to hit on this as we introduce you and introduce the webinar. Just hit on really slightly. We did in our last webinar talking about what Zenapptic is, what it does, the capabilities and so forth, and even what it is not.
Mhm.
So for those that weren't able to join, we'll have that one available if you want to reference that for background. But David, just hit on really quick, like what is Synaptic, and kind of your thoughts behind that and what the platform is today.
Yeah, Frank, that's a great place to start. So Zenapptic is really a reimagining of what I've been working on for the last 20 plus years. It's my third company, my third startup company that I started in broadcast doing live television, Super Bowl, Monday Night Football, elections, live news. I moved on to digital signage with X2O to take the ideas from broadcast and kind of repurpose them for new markets outside of broadcast, digital signage being one of them. And I sold that company to Barco. I thought after I sold to Barco, I thought that was it for me. I'd done everything I wanted to do. But while I was away, everything changed. Technology changed, the way people work changed. There was a pandemic. And I felt it was just a great time to kind of rethink things. I call it a reimagining because I'm not doing the same thing I was doing before. So it's not a digital signage system. It's not a live broadcast system that we're building here at
Hmm.
Zenapptic.
Yep.
It's really an experiential platform, an experience management system. And I talk a lot about experiences. I talk a lot about immersive experiences specifically. How can we use some of these same ideas we've been working on for so many years to create connections with people who are in environments? It's not just about
Yep.
what's on a screen, pushing it at people who are in front of the screen. It's about how do we create these communities of users who are getting value by being in front of the screen, and what is that value that we can manage. So really, we are a management platform for managing live experiences.
Perfect. Yeah. So you hit on a couple buzzwords. I want to hit on those really quick just as we kind of continue on here. Experiential, immersive, and then obviously kind of the topic today, live events. Just maybe in those three, kind of hit on those. What do you mean by those so that we have context kind of going into this?
One of the most important words I use is experiences. And there's a reason for that. There's another really important word that I'll get to in a second. But if we think of things instead of as screens and content on screens, but more as experiences, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here really quickly because I had a
Yep.
couple of slides that will help
Yep.
me tell the story a bit better. Um, and I go into my slideshow mode here. When we talk about experiences, everyone thinks the Sphere in Las Vegas is a great experience, and it is. We didn't build the Sphere, but it's a great example of bringing people together and letting them sort of share a common experience. And if I throw in all these bullets here beside, the word I was talking about that's kind of most important from my point of view is that word engagement that's here in the last bullet. How do we connect with people? And that's something that I think the sphere is not really doing well.
Yeah.
It's great at immersing people, but it's not great about connecting with people and getting them to engage and do things when they're in that environment. And that's really what we're
Yeah.
all about. And that's what experiences, I think, allow us to do.
Totally. No, and then you hit on a big word there, engaged. And I think we're going to talk more about that in here in this webinar today. One thing I want to hit on is, and we kind of talked about this before, David, is traditionally when you look at like live events, and you think about the scale of where things are today. Traditionally in the past, to get that level of engagement, that level of that immersiveness, 3D, even word before we were using those words, right? Like for things like say it's a Super Bowl or some really big live event like a concert maybe, um, it would cost millions and millions of dollars. There was a lot of, I mean, you saw that even early on with one of your first companies. But today it's a little more accessible, right? And even the platform Zenapptic makes it much more accessible. It's something that even it, for a corporate company, right, or even a larger type company could do. Can you talk a little bit about that? What makes it possible with Zenapptic for a large corporate company to be at that scale of one of those massive type of events?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the most important things that we did along the way when we're developing the platform, we kind of rethought the idea of events and experiences in general, right? And people think of live events as being giant screens like you see on my slide here, but they don't have to be. Anything can be an experience. Anything can
Yeah.
be part of this event. It could be mobile phones, it could be desktop computers, it could be VR goggles. And what we do is we connect it all together. We use these different parts, these
Hmm.
different systems to create this overall experience, which means that sometimes it could be on a giant video wall, big projection mapped environment. Sometimes it could be only on your desktop computer. Sometimes it could be on your mobile phone. And sometimes it could be combinations of all these different things. But it's the same idea all the time. It's always about that experience for the end user and how are we letting them connect to all these different, not just content sources, but other people in the environment. And I keep saying that it's about the connection that we're creating with people.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and this is great because those that are familiar with Synaptic know that this platform, right, obviously is not just for live events, but it can hit on other fixed installations, right, or corporate environments, lobbies, and so forth. But the ability for it to aggregate, pull everything in, makes it possible. And um, correct me if I'm wrong, but being a live event, things can be even a little more tricky, right? You got a lot more moving parts going on. So maybe we can talk about that. Like we'll talk about a specific event in a moment here, but how does that come into place? Like live streaming, for example. How is that handled, and how is the Synaptic platform, addressing that?
To us, the live video streaming is just one of those inputs. You think of us as a system that's managing inputs and outputs at the most basic level. Then you think of, well, video streaming is one example of that. Everything is an example of that. IoT sensors, motion detectors, gesture interfaces, databases, social media, they're all inputs that are coming to us, and we're using those inputs to create the overall experience, right? And
Hmm.
it's really a platform that lets you do that. And we do that across different use cases. You mentioned that the platform can be used for a lot of different things. And today we are talking about live events, but it could also be fixed installs. It could also be workplace of the future. We're doing some pretty big projects in that space. They're different in terms of the user experience, what the user is doing, but they're not different in terms of what we're doing with all of those different inputs. And it could be live video streaming. It could be your CRM. It could be a ticketing system that's selling tickets. They're all just inputs that come in and let us create these different things, these different types of experiences.
Yeah, that's great. The ability to create different types of experiences. I like that. We've hit on several different types of events in the past, just at trade shows,
Mhm.
sales events, and so forth. And all those things, I mean, just to name off, repeat some of the ones you said, whether it's like maybe it's an interactive digital twin, maybe it's a polling going on, right?
Mhm.
Check-in, there's some sort of tracking, there's a live integration with some sort of transmission feed that's coming in. All those coming in help to add to the experience, right? Whether it's live or not.
Exactly.
Um, and that's what's been the creative part is that each one is different, right? There's going to be a different experience every time, and that's what I think is important here, right? Is people can get bored really easily these days, right?
Yeah.
I know my teenagers can easily with the phones, So how do you keep that engaging? And I know there's some current projects you're working on that we can't talk about at this moment. A little later, I'm excited to talk about those, but where that's
Yeah.
the case, right? You're changing and shifting how whether it's a concert series or something else looks and feels. So talk about the slide you have up right now, but the
Yeah.
management system.
Yeah, I brought this up just because I think one of the most important ideas here is you can think of Synaptic as your core platform, right? We're a core platform that's connecting everything together. On day one, it does something very specific. On day two, it can be completely different. I think that ability to future-proof, be able to bring things in and out, swap things in and out, add new technologies as they become available without changing that core base system. I think that's a really important concept when we think about Synaptic as a platform. And you mentioned before some of these projects. I can just put up a really quick slide here that
Yeah.
shows some of the recent things that we've done. And I'll throw them all on right now, and we can talk about them one by one. On the left are more fixed installs, so not as appropriate, but still a couple of interesting things there. We're doing a big project in New York, Times Square right now with the One Times Square building, where we're the core
And that's
platform.
been and that's been an ongoing project too, right, David? It's not just a
Yeah.
one-time thing. It's been, yeah,
Yeah, it has. We've been working with them for at least 5 or 6 years now. They're gutting the inside of this iconic building at the base of Times Square. They're turning it into an experience center, which is really a combination of many different experiences. And some of them are live events. Every year we do this virtual New Year's Eve event. We have millions of people around the world who are connected through our platform. They're watching live streams from around Times Square, different artists playing on stages, interacting with different people in the environment. And that's a live version of this. Then there's another part where you walk in and there's going to be a museum, a Times Travel Museum, Times Square through
yeah.
the years. There's a candy experience. There's an observation deck. There's a New Year's Eve center on the top floor. And every part of this is tied to the same Synaptic core platform that shares information. We know who the people are in the environment, and we can change content dynamically based on what's happening. And then we give these very comprehensive analytics reports at the end of the day where we bring
Yeah.
in AI. We do all kinds of really cool things to get these in-depth insights. Great example of a fixed install on a massive scale. If I move to the right really quickly here, the Delta Airlines example is another good example of a fixed install where we create this virtual world, this virtual environment that you
Hmm.
see through the lens of these LED segments on the walls. It's not actually playing a video. The LED is more like windows into a virtual world outside those windows, and it happens to be the Utah National Parks, where we create these real-time environments that look like they're videos, but we make it rain, we make birds fly, we play with 3D sound, we do all these really cool things in this immersive space. Moving to the right again really quickly, this project again in New York City in Manhattan. This is a global headquarters for a big sports league that is creating a new headquarters where the all of the screens in the environment are all connected together in this shared experience for employees, for
Hmm.
sponsors who come in, for different athletes who come in, where we can instantly take over every screen in the environment and change the content that people are seeing. It's all real time, real interactive. There's social media, all kinds of different things happening. So those first three are examples of fixed installs, not as much of the live event stuff. But if we
Yeah.
move a little bit more to the right, those are where we start talking about the live aspects of the system. So the first
Yeah.
example is an annual meeting. I think you talked about this a second ago, Frank, or you alluded to this a second ago. A big corporate event, an annual meeting for this company, Checkpoint, who is a cybersecurity company, very well known for firewalls, big international company. They had their big event in this really cool venue, which was an old renovated train station that's now used for all kinds of things, but live corporate events is one of them. We projection mapped that entire space. So our creative team created these branded projection
Yeah.
mappings. It was all live. There's a stage in the middle, and behind that stage, on that giant wall behind the presenter that you kind of see on my screen there a little bit, we were showing live PowerPoints. We were doing interactive polling with the audience. People from the audience could send messages during the event. So the audience members were actually connected with the speaker who was presenting, and it was over the course of a full day. We can talk a lot more about that. Before we do, though, I'll talk about the last example here. This is a very cool thing that we're working on right now for a big recording artist who wants to create this immersive concert experience where people, when they buy their ticket for their big arena rock concert,
Hmm.
they'll sit in front of their webcam, their picture will get taken. We will take those pictures from thousands of fans. We will crunch them all in the cloud in our big AI backend, and we will create different videos and pictures, images of people doing different things. And we will then insert them on the giant screens in the actual stadium behind the band who's playing on the stage. And it will be synchronized with what's happening, what song is playing, what's happening on stage, what the artist is doing. There'll be selfies you can take with the artist, with you playing guitar and your
Very
favorite
cool.
singer. Great example of a massive live event on a huge scale. It's got
Yep.
all kinds of things that we talked about before, ticketing and payment systems and merchandise sales and user profiles, all kinds of really cool things, but on a massive scale. So
Yeah. All
that's
being
sort of
run by
the
the
runs the gamut of everything that we've been working on lately.
Totally, yeah, and all being aggregated and run by the Zenapptic platform. I love that. So let's go back to the checkpoint engage really quick. That's definitely not small, right? You talked about the projection mapping going on, um, probably LED involved in there, but then all the information you're pulling in. This is for a global cybersecurity giant, right? They're pretty
Right?
big. They have a pretty high bar for technology. In this live event in particular, you may talk about this, but you help bridge the gap for hundreds of attendees on site and online simultaneously, right? And people were engaged there. And this is something they had not done before. Um, so talk about it, and then kind of a two-part question. Was there a big like kind of aha moment, like during or after the event, when you saw how the technology actually changed the audience and how they reacted?
Yeah, there was. We first started speaking to Checkpoint. We told them what was possible, and they were originally what they've done in the past is they do these really cool projection mappings and really nice graphics, and it's very impressive visually. But they were looking for more connection with the audience, more persistence with the people who were attending. And this could be employees, it could be partners, it could be customers. And they wanted to create this more, they wanted their brand to be more instilled in everybody who was in the environment. And when
Yeah.
we started talking, we said, well, look, we're all about creating those connections with people. How can we create that permanent connection, that two-way connection between the audience and the presenters, so that people are more engaged, so that their dwell time increases? And you go back to my digital signage days. How do we get people doing things longer when they're in the environment? And how do
Right.
we sort of customize that behavior? How do we get the behavior that we want out of people? And Checkpoint really clicked with that to the point that they came back and said, well, we're going to call our events Engage, which was great because I'd been talking about engagement. And they said, well, let's brand our whole, they used to call it Checkpoint CPX, and they do these shows around the world, big one in Las Vegas. They decided to move more towards these country-based shows, and they wanted to create this more sort of direct connection with their attendees, and Engage really clicked with them. So now their events are all called Checkpoint Engage, and they're talking about experiences, right? And not just an experience, but it's a data-driven experience. Everything that we
Hmm.
do in these environments for these live events is really all about the data. And you asked before, what was one of the big learnings here? I think the learning on Checkpoint's side, we worked with their marketing department, who were really not technologists in any way. All they knew
Right.
was they wanted to create this connection with people in the environment. At the end of it all, we created this dashboard for them that showed, they thought we were just going to show how many people were in the room. We showed them, I don't know, about 100 different data points of different things that happened when people were in the room, not just how many people were there overall and how many people were remote, which I'll talk about in a second, but what did people do when they walk through the registration area, which was all driven by the Zenapptic platform. Again, people would walk in, they get registered, they get a QR code stuck on their badge. They'd walk into the space, and they didn't start with the presentation area. They started with the expo area. It was almost like a trade show
Yeah.
with all of these sponsors who had booths set up during the event. And those sponsors were people like AWS or Wiz, which is another big giant cybersecurity company, who actually paid to be in the environment with their own booths. And as attendees would walk by, they had a web app on their phone from Synaptic that they can then scan the attendees' QR codes. All of this generated data that went into our back end. Every time someone requested information, every time someone walked up to a booth or walked into a different room or sent a message to the screen, it all generated content or data going into our back end. So that's why we call it a data-driven experience. It's really about collecting that marketing data. And when we sent it all, we showed it all to the marketing people at the end of the event. They were like, wow, we had literally 100 times more information than they were actually looking for, which let
Yeah.
them measure that engagement. That was really what they were all about. And we'll talk about this next bullet that's on my screen here in a second, but these virtual spaces. But it became this very targeted experience where the bottom line here was their ROI. How could they make their event more engaging and ultimately boost the investment that they're making in these events?
Hmm. Yeah.
Um,
No, that's great. You hit on pretty much every gamut you were talking about before and how this platform comes together. So we've got a few minutes left, and maybe take the next 5 minutes and just kind of hit on this a little bit more. You're talking about gamification. You're talking about the ROI. So just talk about
yeah.
this a little bit more in depth on what that meant for Checkpoint.
Yeah, you think about the different kinds of options that we can bring. It's not just projectors projecting PowerPoint on screens and doing that better. It's more about creating that participation from the end users, the visitors in the space. And we do that with these different options, different ways of collecting information. I mentioned QR codes a second ago, but we also work with bracelets and beacons and pins that people can wear. And as they walk through the space, we can track all of that. We can create these interactive event boards, big video walls. We do things with social media. We call them social walls, where people can then see everything is being posted on Twitter or on Instagram or on Facebook. And they can, more than that, they can interact with it. They can leave their own messages, we call it digital graffiti, where they can actually leave these fingerprints behind that make them really feel like connected to the event. We can do gamification, which we mentioned before. I find that very effective at live events and trade shows. We let people play
Hmm.
games on screens, and as they're doing that, we're collecting their information. We're getting the data from them. What are they interested in? And then the online event, I mentioned virtual add-ons for Checkpoint and for other projects. We've actually created these live 3D digital twins, these environments that people can visit who can't necessarily, maybe they can't necessarily get to the live physical event, but they can get online in a web browser, and we can create this
Yeah.
interactive 3D space, almost like a video game, because it's not just streaming video. They can actually go through that space, that 3D space. I had an example here of a couple of different projects where we did this. The Checkpoint engages on the bottom where we got the 3D environment with the sponsor area. We
Mhm.
did something for SEGD, which is the Society of Experiential Graphic Designers. We did this with TAD in New York, where we created a 3D model of the TAD offices. And then as people were in this
Mm.
workshop, these 7 different areas during the event, we would stream that out to people who are remote in this web browser, and people could navigate. They can join the workshops. They could share information. They could see exactly what's happening without having to necessarily fly to New York. So this digital twin part of the story, I think, is really, really interesting. It lets us create these hybrid
Yeah.
events where we can bring people in remotely, we let them present remotely, we let people participate in web browsers remotely, and we end up with people kind of everywhere. You got the big physical event. I think in Checkpoint's case, there were 500 people in the actual live event in that train station I mentioned. And there were another 500 people who were remote, who were watching the same content, watching live video streams, but interacting with the same sponsors. And we're collecting all that marketing data from them as well. And basically letting them experience things without actually being there physically.
Yeah. So let's pause there for a moment, David. This is great. And I just want to point on one or two things, and then got a couple question or two here that's being asked. The you talked about, just with the events and the what you don't hear about a lot of times is the digital twin aspect. What I really like about that is it becomes something you can take on afterwards, right? And so people can engage after the event within a space that's been created specifically for that event and for that environment and for that client, really. So that's
Exactly.
really unique. I like that. Becomes very
Yeah.
engaging. We've seen that a couple times with some of the trade shows you've done, trade show booths. But this one in particular looks, I remember seeing as very, very cool. So, really quick, I have a question or two here because we only got a couple minutes left. But maybe kind of hit on what do you think, just from your experience, what kinds of interactions? Oh, is that audio
I,
coming through there?
sorry, I'll mute this in a second. I was just showing the actual digital twin example from Checkpoint.
Yeah.
And what you're hearing is the recorded video that's coming through. That same presenter I just showed as a still, that's what was streaming out into the digital twin.
Right.
And, it was all branded checkpoints, throughout the whole event. And I will mute that one for now.
That's okay.
Sorry, Frank. Go
That's okay.
ahead.
No, very cool. Glad you showed that. Um, so yeah, that's very intriguing and very differentiated. Just really quick, what kinds of interactions do you think tend to drive the highest engagement for these events? Is there one that kind of particularly stands out? Maybe it's a tool, maybe it's is it gamification? What do you kind of see as kind of the most intriguing and popular?
We've done things that have nothing to do with the actual events. We've done selfie walls where you take your picture with your phone. It goes up on the screen. We use AI to add funny hats and glasses and
Hmm.
things like that. And we swirl around all these live pictures from the audience up on the screen. And it's got nothing to do with the event itself, but it's fun. It's creating this engagement. People feel, hey, this is cool. There's me on the screen. Look, I'm part of the actual event. We do things like gamification, the example on the right there, people playing pinball, these multiplayer games on big video walls, where they're just, again, nothing to do with the live event. We've done things with augmented reality as well,
Yeah.
where you might take things that are happening on the big screen, take it on your phone and then play a little game in front of you on the table or on the floor in front of you, maybe against other people. We had these bar games for another
Yeah.
one of our partners that we did, like a mobile. We had these sports challenges, like the quarterback challenge and things. You played it on your phone. Again, nothing to do with the event, but it just brought people in. And along the way,
Yeah.
yeah, we were showing them branding messages and promos and things like that. But it was really just ways for people to have fun. And I think that
Those are
having
great.
fun is a key message to creating that engagement that I was talking about.
Totally. Yeah, no, those are great examples. Okay, last question here. Got about a minute left, but a little different. But so in these environments, you talk about data and analytics being very important and the backbone for a lot of these. It's not just the cool content, and it's the fun part, definitely. But then obviously when it comes down to it, the ROI piece, right? So
Right.
when it comes down to that for the client, who owns the content or the data after the event, and how does that work typically?
Yeah, really, really important point is that we are not keeping any of that data, right? We're collecting it on behalf of the customer and we're using it to enhance the experience, but it ends up being this database that the customer owns at the end of the day. Look at all of my examples I shared earlier actually fall into that category. My example of the one-time square. They're going to be building millions and millions of data points for every one of their users. That's not Zenapptic data. That belongs to One Times Square. And in
Yeah.
Checkpoint's case, that goes back into their CRM. It's another big part of what we do. One of the
Yep.
systems we talk to with all those connections I talked about, right? Our CRMs. We take the data, we might pull from the CRM, we might write back to the CRM, we might use AI to massage that data, manipulate that data. But at the end of the day, it's all customer data and customer content, and they're just
Yep.
using our platform as a tool to create
Perfect.
that engagement.
Perfect. Well, I hate to cut you off there because there's a lot more to that, but for those that joined and were with us and maybe watching this recorded afterwards, definitely encourage you to reach out for one-on-one. We're just kind of scratching the surface here of what's possible as Synaptic, not even just in events, but just overall. So definitely encourage you to reach out to 4Media and Zenapptic for a one-on-one demo and a more specific discussion on how we can help you. David, thank you for being here today. Always enjoy listening to you and about Zenapptic and all the awesome things you're doing. And looking forward to seeing, as we work on more projects together, how we can make that happen. So thank you all today for joining. And we look forward to hearing from you after the event. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.